Hello friends, in the lesson we are going to study batch class in Apex. So let's go. What is batch class? Batch class in Salesforce is used to run large jobs. Think thousands of millions of records you want to work on it. Okay, that would exceed normally processing limits because of governor limits in Apex. Using batch Apex, you can process records asynchronously in batches, divide them. Hence the name batch Apex. To stay within platform limits, if you have a lot of records to process, for example, data cleansing or archiving, uploading some, so which when you have many records, a lot of records, so you can do through batch Apex without having problem with limits. Batch Apex is probably your best solution. Here how batch Apex works under the hood. Let's say you want to process 1 million records using batch Apex. The execution of logic of batch Apex class is called once for each batch of records you are processing. Each time you invoke a batch class, the job is placed on the Apex job queue and execute as a discrete transaction. So what are the advantages of using batch Apex? Means every transaction starts with a new set of governor limit, making it easy to ensure that your code stays within the governor execution limit. If one batch fails to process successfully, all other successful batch transactions are not rolled back. It means if you want, you save 1,000 and then between 1,000 and 1,200, if there is problem, so the one which are saved, they will not roll back. So what are the key points in batch Apex? To write a batch Apex class, your class must implement the database.batchable interface and include the following three methods. We are going to see the syntax, don't worry about that. So we must have three methods. One is start, execute, and finish. If your code access external objects, your code accesses external object and is used in the batch Apex, use iterable as objects instead of this method, not database.queryLocator. The default batch size is 200. If you don't write anything for batch size, so by default it is 200 records. You can write 200 or less than that. 150 depends on your request. So batch Apex syntax is that your class should be global, but sometimes can be public if you're between your org. Global and class, my batch class, this is the name, and implements, this is keyword, it must implement database.batchable as object. Then after we have like global start database.queryLocator. You can either use queryLocator, database.queryLocator, or iterable as objects. And start what database batchable context and BC. So this we have start method here. So either one of them we can use here. Collect. So what is start method used for? Collect batch of records or object to be passed to the execute. After the start methods, then the codes, the records or job comes to the execute. This is the main part. So global void execute. Global void execute. As you can see, we don't have here void. Then it must return something there. and global void execute database context, and then we have the list of records here. This is the main part, and process each batch of records. After that, when it is done with execute method executed, then comes to global void finish method. And again, this database dot batchable context, it is must in each and every method. BC. This part start, execute, but here you must have extra list of the records. So, and block. So the finishing part execute any post processing, like if you want send email to the who is the owner of the records, can get email after finishing. Finish method, it executes only once, but execute method many times it repeats. So just have a quick understanding how batch job execution happen in each order or method execute. The first method is start. It identifies the scope, like list of data to be processed, and automatically collect at the beginning of the Apex job. This method will collect record or object on the which the operation should be performed. This method will collect records or objects on which the operation should be performed. Then this is the global database query locator start. This is our syntax for that. Global, I think global class and database query locator start batchable, database batchable context and BC. Then we come to next is execute method. Execute method processes a subset of the scope, record and performs operation which we want to perform on the records fetched from the start method. So global void execute, as you can see here, global this is I made a small mistake. Start method, it is global database locator or iterable as object as you wish, and then start. And here is we have execute method, it is global void execute database.batchable and list of objects, and this should be, of course, just to close, there is a small mistake here. And then finish method executes after all batches are processed. This method is used for any post job or wrap up work, like sending confirmation email notification your job is done or not done, or gives report. Global void finish, this is the syntax for that. So monitoring batch apex, how we can monitor batch apex? To monitor or stop the execution of batch apex job from going to setup, enter Apex job in the quick find box, and then select Apex job. So you can have details. I will show you after that. So how to execute a batch job? We have start method and put the job and queue. The jobs were in the queue, and then when they are invoked or processed by execute method, and then we will get message failed or completed, partially success, something like that. So jobs are divided in batches. But this is one example of batch class in Salesforce. As you can see, let's see, we have global, as we know, class batchable Apex, like Apex example. Implements, this is important keyword, database batchable as objects. Then after we have start method, global database query locator we are using here, and start database batchable BC. And then collect what happens here, collects the batch of records or object to be passed to the execute method. So in this what we want to do, string query, select ID from account. Return database get query locator. This is a query, right? And then Since we don't have void here, then it must return some data. Database.getQueryLocatorQuery. Then after we have execute method, the main part where records are being sent. Then global void execute database patchable context list of account. We are going to create, right, by this select ID with this SOQL. We are going to create a list of S-object, is account ACC. And process each batch of records, default size is 200. So by default, if you don't write number. So for account ACC list, we are going to create a loop, update the account name. Account name is equals to account name plus SFDC point. And if when we are inserting then updating, if there's any problem, let's catch it. Says it's good to have try and catch exception. This try what update this list, right? And then catch any if there is any mistake. After we have finish method, global void finish, and then execute any processing like sending a mail. So invoke a batch class. How we invoke a batch class? To invoke a batch class, simply instantiate it and then call database execute batch with the instance. This is my batch class object or name, and then we create a new my batch class, and then ID batch class. We create also database ID and batch ID. Database dot execute execute batch, my batch object. Which one is that? This name. You can also optionally pass a second scope parameter to specify the number of records that you should pass to the execute method for each batch. Pro tip, you might, so if you want to have a like ID batch, database execute batch, my batch object, then 100, 200 maximum we can have here. Okay, each batch Apex invocation creates an asynchronous job Apex job record so you can track the in-job progress. You can view the progress via SQL or manage your job in Apex job queue. So there are some best practices you can have. As with future method, before we said that if there are records, many records, then you can use batch class. So batch class and future methods are close to each other. There are few things you want to keep in mind when using batch Apex. To ensure fast execution of batch job, minimize web service calls out times and turn queries used in your batch code. The longer the batch job executes, the more likely other queue jobs are delayed when many jobs are in the queue. Best practices included: only use batch Apex if you want to have more than one batch of records. If you don't have enough records to run more than one batch, you are probably better off using queuable Apex. Turn any SQL query to gather the records to execute as quickly as possible. Minimize the number of asynchronous requests created to minimize the chance of delays. Use extreme care if you are planning to invoke a batch job from a trigger. You must be able to guarantee that trigger won't add any batch jobs than the limit. Up to 5 queue or active batch jobs are allowed for Apex. Only 5. And methods declared as future aren't allowed in class that implement database batchable interface. Method declared as future cannot be called from a batch Apex class. I hope you have learned something new. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.